Hello, and welcome to the Indie Nook. It's primarily an indie games podcast, but we chat about all things indie, and occasionally gaming news. I'm your host, Blake McKean, and today I'm just so excited to be here because there is some Citizen Sleeper news. I honestly couldn't believe it. After I hopped off the mic for the last episode, the next day there was some exciting news, and I'm super excited to share that with you all. Citizen Sleeper is just an incredible game, and I've talked about it on every episode of the Indie Nook so far, which, to be fair, has only been 3, but I'm still over the moon about it, and I've honestly thought about changing the tagline of the show to desperately trying not to be a Citizen Sleeper podcast. But there's some exciting news, and I'm excited to talk about it. And, I mean, obviously, Citizen Sleeper has the highest recommendation for me. I think it's a great game, and I think that just about anyone would like it. There's something for everyone. And, yes, super excited, Citizen Sleeper news. So we're going to talk about that. But on the docket for the day, we've got some Citizen Sleeper news. There's some Game Boy Color news, actually. And then I rolled credits on Citizen Sleeper, and I wanted to talk about my experience with that. When we get to that point, I'll mark it clearly in the show so you'll know if you want to step away for spoiler reasons. But just moving on to this exciting news, they announced that they're going to be doing a Citizen Sleeper 2. And there was a trailer that featured some amazing art by Guillaume Singling? I think that's how you say his name. He is the artist, and he has an incredibly unique art style. Or I guess I don't know. I guess they have an incredibly unique art style. And go check it out. The trailer, it's like 2 or 3 minutes. Absolutely worth your time. And it appears that you're the captain of a ship. And whether you're transporting goods or smuggling goods, or if you're a mercenary, it's not really clear. But you're on a ship and you move, and it's hinted that you move between the Eye and other stations or planets. And there's a bit more, but I will leave that for you to discover. So go check out Citizen Sleeper 2. I really didn't think that they were gonna make a second one, but I'm really excited to see that team do some more, because I just absolutely loved it, which maybe we'll get to, or I guess we will get to later in the episode. And I'm really interested to see how this ties to the first game, because something that I didn't know until recently is that there are multiple endings, which we will talk about later. And I guess it's not really a spoiler. I didn't personally see this, but I know that it is out there. I mean, the game is really designed to be kind of challenging in the beginning, and there's an ending where you just don't make it, and you don't make it through the challenging part of the game in the beginning, and if you don't manage your resources correctly, or if you don't manage your resources correctly, and you get unlucky, you can die at the beginning of the game, and that's one of the endings. So, I mean, it wasn't super struggling, or I didn't really struggle with it all that much, but it is certainly meant to be challenging so that you can kind of feel the narrative struggle that the character is going through. So definitely interesting to see how they tie that up. And they announced it, and then a couple days later, I've kind of just been sitting here speculating about what they're going to do, and they announced that there's going to be, or they have more information available. And alongside the trailer, they announced something titled Helion Dispatches, which is described as a pirate radio station broadcast from a refugee ship as the Helion system falls into the grip of a corporate war. This text-based narrative project bridges the gap between Citizen Sleeper 1 and 2. And I'll let you discover that for yourself, but I've left a link to the broadcast in the show notes. And honestly, I'm just so excited for Citizen Sleeper 2. But moving on, there has been some interesting Game Boy Color news that came out this week. McDonald's, the fast food chain, they released a Game Boy Color game. And, it's June of 2023, and I just think that's awesome. They did this to celebrate one of one of McDonald's characters' birthday, which I just think is just a funny concept. They did this to celebrate Grimace's birthday, and Grimace is, I guess I don't really even know how to describe him. He's kind of just like a furry blob, and he's purple. So that's Grimace. I definitely remember seeing him on some art on like the cups when I was a kid. Like there's like the Hamburglar, and there's like Grimace. I guess that he was one of the mascots at the time. So to celebrate his birthday, and it kind of coincides with the release of a new McDonald's meal where they have a purple shake. They're releasing a Game Boy Color game. And this Game Boy Color game features Grimace doing platforming on a skateboard, and I'm really excited to try it out. I haven't played it myself, but I got the ROM already, so I just don't really know where I want to play it. I mean I could put it on, an actual Game Boy cartridge and put it on my Game Boy, but I guess we'll just have to see if I want to go through the work to do that. But yeah, I've linked in the show notes, I've linked an article by IGN, and I think they do a great job putting all the information in one place, and there's, a link to the website and a link to the archive, where they have the ROM stored, or where archivists have stored the ROM. So you can play it on a web browser, or you can download the ROM and play it on an emulator, which is probably what I'm gonna do. There's just the ease of use of putting it on my Steam Deck. I'm really considering doing that. But I just really love these handheld consoles, and it's just awesome to see more and more acknowledgement about them recently. And I just think it's awesome. With Nintendo Switch Online, they recently put Game Boy Color, Game Boy, and Game Boy Advance, and I just think that's awesome. I mean, those are some of my favorite consoles, and they really have a visual style all their own, and I really appreciate that. I grew up with the Game Boy Advance, but I do really like the Game Boy Color and Game Boy aesthetics, and I don't know, I'm just really into it, and I think that they can say a lot and do a lot with the hardware and those limitations of the time. So very excited to see this this McDonald's Game Boy Color game. Excited to see what it's about. And yeah, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about Citizen Sleeper. And I have rolled credits, and I will be diving into spoilers here. So if you'd like to remain spoiler-free, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a little bit of a shorter one, it looks like, but I guess that's before we get into spoilers. So thank you for joining me. And if you're sticking around, thank you. But if you haven't played Citizen Sleeper, again, I've talked about it so much on the Indie Nook. But it's just a wonderful game and has just absolutely the highest recommendation for me. It's relatively short. It's about 6 hours, depending on your play style. I went over 6 hours, and I still might play it a little bit more to see another ending. So I feel like I'm at a stopping point with the game, but I kind of just want to see the other things just to see them. But I might not, because I've seen a few endings, and the last one that I saw I really liked. So that's what I'm going to talk about here in this next segment. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. And if you're going to log off now for the spoilers, thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day. Now, alright, we're in the spoiler section. Citizen Sleeper. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I picked this back up and saw it to the end. I mean, I'm really just completely blown away by it, and I'm really impressed, by how much this game made me feel from, start to end. In the beginning when I talked about this game on the Sticky Buttons podcast, it is, largely a text-based narrative game that really resembles a board game, as I've said many times. But I mean, it is the majority of the time you are reading, and obviously there's some visuals to go along with it. But I mean, like, you reading the text is really how you spend most of your time. In the beginning, I was really just blown away by how this one quest, I guess, made me feel, where I was confronted with a bounty hunter, and they tried to kill me a couple times, and I ended up choosing in the dialogue I had the confrontation had gotten to the point where I could have like, I had a gun in my hand. I could have like potentially killed the bounty hunter, and just the weight of that, and like the role playing, and like what the character would do in that moment. Obviously, like you're projecting onto this character as well, and I went through, like trying to kill the bounty hunter in the beginning, and like I really like I was playing on my Switch, and I had to like set it down, and I just like the weight of that in the beginning, like, is this what I'm gonna do? Like, am I really about to do this? And I really thought about it, which, I mean, obviously if you're in a moment, like you know, fight or flight, but this is a video game. I ended up, trying to kill them, and there were other circumstances that prevented, me from doing that. The gun had been unloaded by a bystander, without my knowing at the time when I was making the choice. So they didn't end up dying, but they knew that I would have done it. And man, seeing how that story plays out, it's really sad. I guess the bounty hunter ends up like, because he fails to bring you in, he gets fired, and he's kind of stuck and stranded on this station. And he kind of went to a bar that was like owned by a gang, and like worked up such a tab that they made him like he works there now as like a dishwasher. He kind of heard from, I guess, like his bounty hunter like roots that there was another bounty hunter that was coming for you, and through that quest, or I guess that storyline, they end up, I guess that bounty hunter, through a series of events, you try to help out the other bounty hunter. They kind of like cut a deal with you, like, hey, if we can take this guy out, like I'll get my status back, and I'll let you go. I'll pretend like I didn't even see you. So you kind of have the choice to help him out or not. And I, for whatever reason, even though like they absolutely wronged me, I decided to, and I like at one point was going to kill them. I ended up like helping them out. And it was kind of funny because I wouldn't necessarily have made that choice, but just like the way that the dialogue kind of worked out, it kind of just like I picked the options that I think I would have said in that moment, and then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm helping this guy now. And then this bounty hunter comes, and they end up killing the other bounty hunter, and you end up, I mean, there's a skirmish, and you take them out. So you do end up killing the other bounty hunter, and at the end, it's kind of implied. I mean, obviously this is open to interpretation, but my interpretation of it is that bounty hunter was a sleeper, and that they were, property and slave to the corporation as much as you were before you left, and that was their job, whereas your job as a sleeper was to do menial labor. Their job was to hunt down other escaped sleepers that the company viewed as property. So very, very interesting, and obviously a lot of emotions, as you can imagine, going through that side quest. Now that's very early on in the game, and it doesn't really, I would say that's really not an ending. That's kind of just, the beginning of the game, beginning to middle of the game. And it just astounded me how much that made me feel, and like how I really connected to the characters through that moment. And then I'm just coming back to it. I'm really happy that I'm, coming back to see it through. So one of the, I guess the first ending that I got, that didn't really feel like an ending to me, is there's a mercenary. They're kind of marooned on the station. You help them with their ship, and there's a sequence of events and that take place, which I won't spoil, because I don't know, I may not have understood what happened, so I'm gonna keep that up to the imagination. But there's obviously like a conflict between the mercenary and her crew, and it kind of ends with you decide to help this person, and they end up killing their crew. And I guess it's kind of hinted that, or I guess my interpretation of it is that, I mean, it was an accident. I think it was an accident, but regardless, their crew is no more. I mean, I think that It's very complicated. I'm not really. I mean, that one storyline in particular. I mean, it plays on a lot of emotions, and the writing is very evocative. However, at the I guess the end of this quest line, you meet them. You meet the mercenary in a place that you do work as a I guess as an engineer, and you kind of help this shop, and the owner's name is Bliss, and you kind of help them um, with their shop, and she's decommissioning her mercenary ship. She's taking all of the weapons and all of that off, and that's kind of the engineering job that you have, is to decommission the artillery and defenses. I don't know if you well, it's at least the artillery of the ship, and you kind of decommission that. And through the end, this mercenary who you've kind of worked with throughout the game, you actually did help them fix their ship originally, and that's kind of your meet cue. Is they're stranded, you decide to help them, and it's very interesting because the owner of the bay, or the hangar bay where you do work, they have an apprentice who you have some dialogue with, and Bliss decides that she wants to leave, and I guess the mercenary cannot pay for the work that's being done, so she's paying it by taking Bliss to another place, and Bliss wants a fresh start. So she's leaving the eye behind, and you have a choice to go with them. And it's very clear that the mercenary has changed. Their character are visually changed, because when you first meet them, they're in armor, and later on, during this ending sequence, they've removed the armor and they're decommissioning their ship. So it's obvious that the sequence of events that led to this was very jarring for them, and you're kind of prompted with the choice: do you go with them or not? And I decided to stay. I decided to stay on the eye, and kind of my thought process was that, despite all the bad that's happened here, and some of it has been kind of traumatic for the character, especially this quest with the mercenary. I decided that you just come so far on this eye, and you kind of see where you started from, and it's just been such a struggle. And by the time I got to this point, I was doing pretty well, and I had built relationships with other characters, and although it may not be perfect, it kind of felt like, why give up on this place that's given me so much? So I guess in the role playing aspect, I decided to stay, and that triggered the credits, and that's the first time that I saw credits. And I guess in some ways that does feel right. I decided to stay, but I wasn't quite done with the game. Like I had talked about previously, there was the hacking quest line, where you're kind of introduced to a sentient vending machine, and you go on to find these rogue programs called the Hunter and the Killer, and through a sequence of events, you kind of decommission that, and or I guess decommissioning is a too light of a word. You end up destroying both those programs, and then you're kind of prompted to continue on to another area of the game, which is called the Greenway. And the Greenway is kind of like I guess to the name, it's kind of like the greenhouses where all of the food is grown on the station, and it's implied throughout the rest of the game that the other parts of the eye, they buy all their food from incoming vessels. So this Greenway, it's kind of like a commune, and they don't necessarily sell the resources as much to the other parts of the eye. So it's kind of like two separate factions, two separate places, and one's kind of very much dependent on these greenhouses. And I really just kind of liked where this went, because you kind of start as farming mushrooms for this older scientist in the commune called Rico. And she's a little bit older. She's always, kind of doing research. She's got a crutch. And she was one of the founding members of the Tribune. Or not Tribune, of the commune. It's very interesting, kind of just to learn about the history of, like, after the fall of the eye, they poured so much time into, I guess, keeping this greenway alive. And she kind of says that there was just a tipping point where everything started to go right. And there was a point in time where it seemed like everything was going wrong. And that all of there were cracks in the glass, and, plants would just get frozen, and there was, like, problems with the decomposing, and it just, like, nothing was growing, and they were starving, and all they could manage to grow were these mushrooms. And she said there was just, like, an invisible tipping point, and things started to get better. And I guess a little bit before this, you kind of go into the network, which is where you discovered the sentient vending machine. You kind of go into the network, and you don't necessarily communicate, but you kind of see another entity, and you see them planting and having an impact on the greenway, and anything from the irrigation system to I guess vibrations in the soil. It's implied that this entity, this gardener, as you call them, the gardener, is using their metaphorical green thumb to have an impact on the greenway, which is very interesting. And you kind of come to learn that this sentient AI has helped out the commune before in ways that they couldn't explain, where some of them were getting sick from a bacterial infection, and then all of a sudden these mushrooms kind of sprang up that had a cure to them, or natural cure. And since you've been there's this mushroom that's kind of started to pop up, and she does some research on it, and it turns out that these mushrooms, if you process them, they contain the same chemical that is used to stabilize you. So it's like your stabilizer, like your medicine, which is, as I've said, the chemical composition is private information owned by the corporation that created you as the sleeper. And I just couldn't believe that. I thought it was really fascinating. And you also, I guess, they have their hand in, or the gardener has their hand in giving you a gift. And you don't necessarily know it at the time, but there's a seed. And you find the seed, and Rico helps you out and grows the seed. And it kind of, when it grows, it's kind of like a mix between metal and roots, and you don't really understand what it is. And once you see it, there's a memory unlocked from your brain where it's eerily similar. It looks very similar to what they put on your original human's head when your consciousness was originally emulated. And they kind of describe it as kind of like a thorny crown, which I just thought was interesting. You kind of go into the net and you communicate with the gardener. And as it turns out, they're also a program from the fallen corporation that inhabited the eye. And they've kind of gone sentient, and their purpose is to take care of all of the millions of plant life, the millions of beings of plant life that are in the greenway. And you kind of communicate with them, and they give you a choice. They say that your body is dying, but if you want, you can join us here, and your consciousness can slip into this greenway, and you can become a sentient AI along with the gardener and the millions of other consciousness that you can feel. And it's described as flowing like a river. And I thought about, there was a moment where I thought about joining it. And I once again was confronted with the weight of this, and had to set my switch down and really think, like, what do I want? And in the end, I decided to stay in my body, like to not join this group of millions of consciousness. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm really happy that I did that. And I actually just wanted to read a little something from after you make that choice, a little snippet of the dialogue. So this is after you've made your choice that you're gonna leave and not accept to join them. The river whirls around you, but it doesn't pull. It isn't jealous. Neither does it understand. It is, after all, just a river. It isn't a person, a flesh and blood person with wants, with desires, capacity to love and hate. It doesn't understand you, and you don't understand it. And I just thought that was interesting because up until that moment, it had really been such a compelling case, to leave the body that you're dying. And I'm sure that there's just as gripping dialogue if you choose to join. I guess if you decide to join these AI and these consciousness in the Greenway, I'm sure that there's some beautiful dialogue there. But once you return to your body, I just thought that this was really, really gripping. Rico says, "Thank you for returning to me, though I know you had your own reasons." She squeezes your hand reassuringly. Something passes between you then, a kind of shared sadness for the impossible choice. The choice to escape your body, or to stay and suffer it. Her smile is warm and generous, and whatever the wisdom of your choice, you are glad to feel welcome in this moment, in this place. And I just thought that was very beautiful, and it really just kind of reminded me, the trials and tribulations of my own life, and how, in some ways, those connect you to others, and we're all in this together. And so, although I'm gonna continue to play the game just to see the other endings, I feel like that one is my ending, and that's the one that I'd like to go out on, and that one's my own kind of headcanon. And I just thought that was awesome, and such a great. I just thought that the endings had really great messages. Like, you decide you've gone through so much on the I, that then you could leave, and you decide to stay, and you once again are given an escape of a different kind, and you decide to stay alive. And I mean, at least those are my choices. I mean, you could have chosen, either out, and I think either of those are valid. But for me, I really liked the message of both of those and kind of sticking through it. But that's really about all I had. I'm super excited for Citizen Sleeper 2. Now that I finished the first one, and I'm very excited to check out McDonald's Game Boy Color game. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Indie Nook. I hope you have a great one, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye.